Fox News will launch a video streaming service aimed at its most hardcore fans, which means video content will soon stream directly to the finder scope of their AR-15s.
Students who survived the Florida school shooting will speak with lawmakers tomorrow about gun control. And they know to use as few big words as possible. When commenting on the Rob Porter scandal, President Trump said he's totally opposed to domestic violence, though he admits that when it comes to domestic violence, there are some very fine people on all sides.
And finally, Donald Trump Jr.'s wife was hospitalized after opening an envelope containing a white powder. The powder wasn't hazardous. She just feels ill every time she receives a gift that wasn't purchased from Barney's. The Trump Report starts now.
Live from Los Angeles, California, AfterBuzz TV and America's Voice. This is the Trump Report.
I love the part where that well-spoken announcer in the beginning says Los Angeles and then throws in California, just in case you didn't know where Los Angeles was. Anyway, welcome to the Trump Report. For those of you watching live at a special earlier time, we're just trying some things out, but mostly we would literally bend all of time and space to be able to be rejoined by our friend Chelsea Galicia.
Wow.
At Chelsea Galicia.
Nice.
We
Thanks.
have literally changed physics. It is not 7 p.m. Pacific time, although it is 7 p.m. Eastern time. So we just moved ourselves. Kind of like the way that time travel worked on the show Lost, but I won't get into the explanation there. By the way, I'm Christian Bladt, at Christian DMZ, and an unofficial sponsor of tonight's show is what I like to call Bladt Fix, which is kind of like if you subscribe to Stitch Fix and you take the clothes and then you wear them on TV with the tag still in it and then you plan on sending it back, which is exactly what I'll be doing. Because I love this shirt, but I'm not going to buy it. Anyway, joined as always by our friend Tamra Brown. Tamra, hey, Tamra,
Hey.
where do people find you?
Hey Tamra, just like Christian hinted, and hey Tamra _ on Twitter.
Underscore. It's your hyphenated married name, Brown dash underscore. But Mr. Underscore is a good man and he treats you well. Anyway, Scott Moore, where do they find you?
At SMan80 because there's too many Scott Moores.
But not
One day when I'm number one, Scott Moore.
You should
I
be
will get
Scott
my
Moore
name.
1 at some point. And just at that time,
Yes.
Mitch McConnell will be tweeting
true.
directly to Scott Moore 1. Maybe that's why he doesn't write back to you, because
Probably.
he's like 80. No, I
No,
can't
he's
do
number
that.
one.
Anyway, there are a lot of things that we can talk about,
boy.
and it's always difficult when you're doing a show like this, and it's many days after the school shooting, but it's still, of course, too soon. And we are going to talk about it a little bit. I think the biggest way to look at it is sort of in the way that President Trump has responded to it. In the immediacy, he took to Twitter to chastise the FBI for not doing anything about, alleged threats made by the gunman in question. I guess we're supposed to call him alleged gunman even when you have video and photograph of him doing it. You still have to say alleged. But anyway, the pig who walked into the high school with the gun, that guy. And he said if only they weren't so busy with the Russian investigation, they would have been able to concentrate on this. Chelsea, when you hear or see something like that, do you think, well, he's our president, I have to support him? Or do you have a different reaction to that?
I think this is a beautiful demonstration of how narcissism is so disgustingly ugly. To think that in entire, I don't know how many FBI agents there are, but I'm going to guess that it's more than a couple. And to think that every last single one of them around the country is so consumed with him is, I don't know what the word is. Silly, ridiculous. It doesn't quite get to the silliness enough. And to think it's all about him, that's why. Now, they messed up big time. Although I wonder, as a lawyer, I wonder, okay, they know of these threats. What laws were available to have them remove the guns, take him into like a 5150, a hold
Right.
against his will? People are writing crazy things on social media, have guns, seem unstable. That describes a lot of people.
Well, and also saying things that sound weird and somewhat unstable seems to me to be what a lot of teenagers post online. So if the FBI, who knows how many threats they see, and look, they should have obviously done something about it in this instance, but I'd like to know, is there also like a file that has, hundreds of thousands of similar things that they're like, yes, we will get to that, but these ones came in first and we need to try and address those. And they had a month to do it. Clearly, I don't think that they didn't get to it because they were too busy making up some things that happened in Russia.
I think that he is really well schooling the nation on psychology. I mean, I know that which act prevents us from playing like armchair psychologists or from actually allowing real psychologists to diagnose somebody that you haven't seen in person, and so they.
Oh yes, yeah. I can't think of it, but I know you're talking about.
Is it the Goldwater?
It was the one where you technically can't. I'll look it up with the president
but
as well.
If you are an undergrad getting a psych degree, you can switch majors and do something else that you enjoy, because all you need to do is read these tweets or see what he says, and there's very likely a personality disorder or psychiatric disorder that shows up.
Probably several.
Very well demonstrated in these. You don't need to pay a very expensive education to see disorders in action.
To that end, this is a perfect example of a point that I've made many times on the show. Even when President Trump, and this is not an instance of something that he did that made sense, but whenever he's doing things and something might be going well, you can always count on something like this to completely derail. And maybe, again, there's always the chance that he's just so smart and calculated that he's like, I don't want anybody to pay attention to what I'm actually doing. Let me just do all these things, and especially a tweet that we'll talk about a little bit later.
There's a chance? You still think there's a chance that he's that calculating?
Oh, I absolutely think so. I think that there could definitely be sort of the big reveal at some point that he's like, I knew exactly what I was doing, but
I think the big reveal is when the entire state of California is demolished from the rest of the country by our own nuclear weapons. I don't know.
Well, what the actual tweet said is, very sad that the FBI missed all of the many signals sent out by the Florida school shooter. This is not acceptable. They are spending too much time trying to prove Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. There is no collusion. Get back to the basics and make us all proud. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders did follow up, by the way, to say the president wasn't blaming the Florida shooting on the FBI. Scott, how could somebody read that tweet and think that he was blaming the Florida shooting on the FBI? I
know, right? I mean, I was going a step further from what Chelsea said, and just the fact that it was disgusting. Because first of all, you're sitting there pointing fingers, blaming other people, instead of, again, focusing on what was actually going on. And like Chelsea said, and he was doing this all weekend long, continuously making everything about him. And it was, I've never, and I know there's been times where I've been surprised still by his tweets. I've never been as angry and disgusted and sickened at a whole new level than what he did this past weekend with those tweets. Again, instead of being the sort of comforter-in-chief that we have grown as a country to be accustomed to.
The most comforting thing about him is probably his hair, if you sit in it or something.
It's like a nest.
There's nothing comforting, I don't think.
And that's, to me, what was sad.
Or if you are of the family of a first responder, then you're getting plenty of comfort from him.
But even then, it's like, instead of focusing on that and these times of need, when you look to a president to do that, instead you have someone who's so beyond narcissistic and, like I was saying earlier, probably has multiple personality disorders, that cannot help himself from posting these things, instead of looking at how devastating that was and helping to comfort those families and the nation at large, and then work on what we can we do to prevent this from happening again. When he spoke, he made zero mentions about guns, and it's just mind-boggling to me that we're still there.
I'm not sure who was worse, almost that tweet from Trump, or what's the Attorney General in Florida,
Pam Bondi. Mm-hmm.
I heard her the next day on, and don't punch me, Christian, but like I was listening to, because I know you're going to be shocked by this.
I just feel,
Maybe he's going to punch himself.
I just feel like you're a majority shareholder or owner in the show. Go ahead. You can say where you heard it.
I was listening to actually Fox News.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that one podcast that you
listen, I know how to change the dial. This is where I get a broad
Honestly,
range of information. But on Fox News, and I could only hear it because I'm in the car, of course, this is a satellite radio, she just, at the first 30 seconds of her interview, she was droning on and on about how great the president is, what a good man he is, that he was so upset that this involved children, and that that was his biggest concern, and there's, no other person like him. I was like, I don't even know what to say right now. What is she? What is her deal?
Well, she was a major fundraiser for him when he was running, and
What
also
position
Governor
does
Rick
she
Scott was
want?
also.
Because there is.
Yeah, well,
what
I will say
spend-
2 things about that. Both her and Rick Scott are term limited, so they will be out after this year. So they probably are looking for their next.
Oh my
gig
God! It
Would
was
they like
so,
an ambassadorship
I know,
somewhere?
right? So
or
some
something?
tropical island.
What were you going to say, Tamra?
I was just going to say it reminds me of, because there's just no rhyme or reason to assign compassion to Donald Trump on any topic whatsoever. It just reminds me of like dog or cat owners who assign personalities to these like animals and be like,
I think the animals have more
he
assignable,
loves
compassionate
superhero movies, and there's just absolutely, you're creating this narrative, and that's exactly what she was doing.
Sorry, you just gave me a great idea. President Cat with Vice President Dog. Nobody steal that idea. I should have probably kept it in my head.
Yeah, there you go.
But,
you can make a whole kids series.
Yeah, believe me.
There you
That's believe me. It'd be the best kids series ever. So obviously there are so many different topics that can come up when it comes to any kind of shooting. And look, there's never a silver lining to anything like this, but what I think is a great thing that we're seeing more than any of these other shootings is you're seeing how outspoken the survivors have been on social media and making appearances. And they're actually, quoting Trump tweets and responding and pointing out, and there's this movement that basically they are saying we should be the last victims of a school shooting. And I think that there's a lot of disagreement for how you can get there. But I think it's a hard sell to be like, hey, do you want this to be the last school shooting in the United States ever?
like, oh, no.
I think, yeah, well, exactly. I feel like
maybe we could use a couple more.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how people look at the world. I don't look at the world that way. And I think it's great that, these kids are much better spoken and articulate than I am, and I'm twice their age. I could be their parents, and literally. So I think it's great that they're able to do that in the wake of the situation. What I did not think was great is about an hour after the shooting, the media outlets that were reaching out to these kids and asking if they could use their videos. And the answer is you probably can, but don't ask right now. Their friends died. They're horrified for what happened. And it's one of those things that I often say about, I don't believe that all media is fake news, but when they do things that are so bad, you're like, it's hard to look past some of the things that the media does.
They wanted the videos from inside.
Yeah,
Yes.
they wanted to be
Okay,
able to use
so-
those.
And they're posting and asking like,
and
oh,
saying, can we use
yes,
this on...
here, call me
I
or
actually don't
email
want to
me.
use any of the outlets because I don't remember which ones I
Right,
saw.
there were specific ones I saw.
Yeah, but I
was
so
like-
I don't remember.
I was going to jump to their defense and say, hey, the students perhaps wanted their videos to be used.
Yeah,
it
but
supports their.
But because you have to ask for permission,
Right.
just
the
ask
timing,
tomorrow,
yeah.
or not at all.
I get it.
That's the way I look at
no
it.
matter when you ask, it's going to be too soon for somebody.
Okay,
No,
but
no,
like
I
an
get
hour
it.
is definitely too soon. Like an hour after, the smell of bullets in the air, I think it's probably not the time to be like, hey, can we use your Twitter on whatever? I, again, don't want to...
I don't know if it's ever a time. We
Yeah.
don't need to be that graphic of a society where I haven't seen any of those videos. I don't want to see
I don't wanna
I
see
have
them
seen
either.
them embedded in things, but I haven't clicked on them or I've scrolled past them
But
because I
some
don't want to see
people-
them.
Sorry to interrupt. Some people, I think, need to see it up close and personal and gruesome.
I agree. Some
I
of the
would
people that
love
are
to
pro
see-
gun and saying that it's not an issue probably are the ones that do need to see it.
So many of these shootings.
The same
that-
people who want the women who go through an abortion first to see the baby. If you're not watching these videos and you're claiming that women need to see images of their baby before, shame on you.
Yep.
It's time to
Have
put your
any
money
of
where your
you
mouth is.
seen statistics on? And so many of these shootings have taken place in red states now. So has there been any sort of like flip among the local community who have been, very pro-gun NRA members. I've wondered if this has personally affected enough people at this point.
Well, I thought of something similar to that, but then I heard that Broward County is run by, or is largely Democrat.
Well, and also Florida, in a way, is not really a true red state. It goes back and forth. But yes, Broward County is definitely very Democratic, and a lot of the other places are.
I mean, when you think about somewhere like Newtown, Connecticut, it was not a
no.
area,
I think
but
that's
Texas,
Sure, yeah.
Sure, but I think that's part of the problem is that it's affected everybody across the board. It's not focused on one particular area, but across the political spectrum and everything. And it would be an interesting thing to see what happened with the Texas with the church shooting afterwards, when people are directly affected by something like that. But I think in the big scheme, it's not going to change.
So after this one, I thought for sure when people are like, this is not a gun control issue, this is a mental health issue. Because I've heard that now from the following, I don't know how many school shootings. I'm like, okay, now this time they're going to come up with some concrete details about that. Because just saying mental health, having mental health, that's kind of like we need cleaner water. Yeah.
Sure we do.
And how exactly is that going to help? How are we going to make that actually catch people, stop them, take away their guns, or make them into compassionate, empathetic people who would never do such a thing? How is our mental health system
there's a
gonna
few
do that?
things that you take into consideration with this. One, there absolutely is a mental health problem, and sure, it should be looked at. I don't know what the solution is, but so in addition to that, also take a look at guns and the amount of time, the ease with which you get them. And there's the answer of, well, people are going to get the guns anyway. Sure, make it as difficult as possible. It's like, hey, you can always buy an AR-15 on the black market. Great. Do you think this kid could have bought a black market AR-15 if they had been outlawed? I don't know the answer to that, but I feel like a lot of the cases, it's like, well, no. And, they'll find another way to cause mayhem. Great. Something that probably won't be as damaging, and, maybe he'll try and make a pipe bomb, it'll blow up in his face, and it'll kill him.
Too.
Right,
So, Go ahead, Chelsea first. Ladies first is the way we work here, Scott.
Well, you were just saying something about,
Mental health?
Well, not only that, but the exact point that I was going to make escaped my mind. So I'm going to let Scott go first because.
So not ladies first is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
sorry.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, I'm Lady Jason. But there's multi-pronged things you have to look at. First of all, if we recall that Trump had signed about this time last year that the Republican Congress passed to make it easier for people with mental issues to be able to obtain guns.
Yes.
Then you're gutting Medicaid and Medicare. You're gutting Obamacare. You're gutting the things that Obamacare allowed to have mental health care included in with insurance and that had to be covered. By gutting these things, you're making it easier to not cover mental health care. Education budgets have been slashed, so you don't have the people there, the counselors on the ground there, be able to work with students. So you have multiple areas you need to work on besides the mental health issues, besides the counseling that you need for schools, besides having the insurance cover those type of conditions and taking care of your citizens. But yes, we clearly have a gun problem because we have mental health all over the planet, but we're the only country that has these type of situations recurring, and that means we also have a gun problem, and we have to look at that as well too.
And now I remember my other point.
It comes back to Chelsea. It always comes back to Chelsea, yes.
Oh, geez. No. That makes me feel very narcissistic. I'm now very sensitive of anything that makes me potentially look narcissistic because it looks so ugly. Another human being.
I just want to be enlightened, so please.
But see, he said it and you didn't say it, so it comes back to me.
Oh, okay, great.
So that's the difference.
Okay, so when people say, well, drug dealers and cartel people, they get all these guns and they are not getting background checks and all this stuff. Yeah, but the cartel people are not coming to schools and killing students.
I mean, if they buy a lot of drugs, maybe they are. But I know what you're saying. In general, the cartels are staying out of the schools. Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
So that is, similar tool, guns creating problems, but that is a sort of a different kind. We've got to get a little bit more nuanced. So yeah, it is guns and mental health and education, and it's a lot of and. There's no. I got to come up with another saying. No silver bullet.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm going to take a controversial stance here. I think that black market guns dealers should not sell guns to anyone under 21. What do you think about that, black market drug dealers? Well, I'm calling you out now.
No, actually, I think 25. Because listen,
you want the black market to have standards for who they sell guns to.
Absolutely.
In general.
Because and this is my reason for 25, whether it's on the black market or not. until age 25, your prefrontal cortex, the executive functioning part of our brains, isn't fully formed. Which is why I believe this why some car rental
Right, it's
places
25.
won't let you rent a car.
It costs more during the
Right,
21 to 25
or if
range.
it's enterprise, they don't care.
So,
Just go
so
ahead. At 21.
people will say, well, you're going to let an 18-year-old go off to war, but then at home you're not going to give them a gun. Yeah.
Yes, there's a
Sorry.
difference.
Hey,
because
hey, they
War.
got the vote, okay?
Yeah.
They can vote, all
There's
right?
a whole lot of training that goes on in the
Right.
military. I don't think anybody's going to argue that the military isn't very well trained when it comes to their guns. So unless you get that level of training, nobody, I think 18 to 25 should be able to get
Right.
their hands on a gun.
Tamra, easy question.
As a civilian, I agree.
Yeah.
Tamra, easy question. How do we fix gun control? Just let us know.
Lord. I mean, it's. Thank
Wouldn't
you.
it be great if it
Thank
was
you
that-
for tossing me a
Wouldn't it be-
softball.
well, that's
It'd be
why
like,
I did it,
wow.
because that's the point I want to make is, wouldn't it be great if you could just be like, oh, actually, I have the answers. I just didn't think to
here's the
share them
thing.
until now.
Build a wall, right? Build a wall.
Yes.
I have a lot of veteran friends who are very divided on the issue of guns because a lot of them are very. A lot of people who are very, very close to me have stockpiled a lot of guns themselves. And from what I understand, when we talk about the gun debate, you know, the issue with automatic, with assault rifles, the problem is that it's not just bump stocks that can turn a gun. There are so many options to turning a gun automatic. Aside from bump stocks, that to take away one thing, there's just a million ways to, I guess, rig a gun so that it can become fire, 25 rounds per minute or whatever it is. There's just the issue of people who just simply don't want that regulation in their lives. No, the government can't tell them what they should or should not do. Second Amendment about the militia. I should defend myself
Right.
against the militia.
Well,
That's what the Second Amendment is for a militia,
Exactly.
a well-regulated one.
I'm not arguing for that because for that logic, it's like, well, then why don't we all have access to tanks and why don't we all have access
I guess
to?
By the way,
that can afford one
I
probably
wish
could.
I had access to a tank. My life would be a lot
I know if I
easier
could get through traffic and I just
God.
roll
Can
over
we-
everything,
I
it'd be
wanna-
great.
I've never heard somebody have a good argument against this following one, and maybe somebody else here does. Every amendment has its limits. Yes, you have the right to free speech, but there's limits
Right.
to that. There are limits to every right that you have. So why are some people refusing to acknowledge any limits on a constitutional right?
Because I personally, this is my opinion, I feel like those people who are unwilling to acknowledge any sort, they're not giving an inch. It's more about I disagree with the other side than it's about
Right, and I
the
think
actual
a
issue
big
and logic
a big
of-
issue
of
it becomes
gun
once you
regulation.
give in a little
Right,
bit,
that's
then
what I was
they're
gonna
going to
say.
take more.
Then they're
It's
gonna want more
it's a
taken
theory
away.
that at first sounds kind of crazy, but somebody was explaining to me this idea when restaurants wanted to ban smoking. That's something we can all get behind, but then it turns into, well, what else is going to be banned? And and then it's like,
Or,
well, now
like-
that's because that's what we want.
I mean,
Right,
well,
but I
sure,
can see
but
like
it's not what everyone wants.
How about this? We had seatbelts. Now, then it stopped at
Yeah, speak
seatbelts.
for yourself, by the way.
We don't now have to wear helmets and stuff while we're driving. That stopped at seatbelts.
Yeah. Well, no, and look, I mean, that's the point, though. I do understand once you give in on smoking as a metaphor, not literally, then it's like, well, then they're going to move on to the next thing. So if you give in on the AR-15, the fear, whether it's real or not, the fear is, I would like to actually have that handgun that I have locked up, with the, that I have to keep my family safe in an absolute emergency. I don't like the idea of that being taken away. And I think a lot of people, and sometimes there's lobbyists and all sorts of groups that will make them think that that's what's going to happen. But you legitimately get afraid of, if we give in on this, where does it stop?
Right, that's what you're going to say, that now they're going to want all guns
Right.
banned eventually, and this will be the stepping stone to that. And so I understand that, but at the same time, it's also, they have to realize there's no place for these type of military-grade weapons in civilian hands ever for any reason. There's just isn't. You have, like you were saying, Tamra, there's so many other choices of guns and other things that there's no reason that you shouldn't have these type of weapons available to civilians. You don't need it.
I do
you don't
think-
need it for hunting. You don't
Go
need
ahead,
it for anything
Tamra.
else.
The thing that is probably making a difference a little bit, I would think, is the amount of the politicians that are being called out for the money that they've accepted from the NRA, and President Trump, how much he accepted from the NRA, because I think that is one thing that could actually maybe potentially get the ball rolling more than it ever has in the past, is that now that, we're actually, it's sort of documented in front of our eyes in convenient Facebook memes how much the NRA has a hand in direct legislation in Congress. So it's like, I think if the Americans are making that connection in their heads as to this is just influenced by the NRA rather than logical gun regulation, that even, pro-gun gun owners and members of the NRA have statistically said that they are in favor of some sort of regulation on, sales to mental illness and loopholes at gun shows and things like that. Like, there are, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but basically, I feel like if we can see which politicians are actually accepting money from special interest groups like this, then that is really going to help put people who are in favor. They want their guns, but they are willing to compromise in some way. I feel like that is a stepping stone to.
And in a moment, we'll take a break. But I did want to let Chelsea.
Thank you.
Get
Two
her
quick thoughts.
Yes. Two thoughts.
Two quick ones. First of all, this slippery slope argument, that's what I think that's like the official name, or I think that's what I remember from law school, that's everybody's argument, that where is it going to stop? Where is it going to stop? I mean, you can say that about everything. You can say that about murder. What? I'm not allowed to murder you? Does that mean I can't murder a fly? Or yeah, I mean, every law has this, like, it could keep going, it could keep going, it could keep going. Just knock it off. It's just silly. You just think about everything individually. And smoking in restaurants went to apartments and all that stuff because that's what the people wanted. If they didn't, it wouldn't have.
You know who didn't want it? The smokers. So, I'm just, look, that's more of like a devil's advocate thing, but that's the point, is the gun owners don't necessarily want there to be no guns. And that is part of the problem, is that the side who wants stricter laws, some of them will say, like, well, how about no guns? That sounds like a great solution to me. And then it's like, well, you're not helping. You're not helping your cause.
That isn't helping. But
correct.
We have an amendment to the Constitution that talks about right to bear arms. 10 or so years ago, Supreme Court said it was an individual right. I disagree with that, but be that as it may, that's the law of the land right now. But we are never going to be a completely gun-free country unless we, take back that amendment, which I don't see happening. So people who go that far, and they're just completely blind to the Constitution. But my second thought, this is not an original thought, but I really do want to get everybody's thoughts on this. Why not require every gun owner to carry insurance, and then let the insurance market regulate safety and requirements and things like that? I mean, if Republicans who love free market, let free market and let insurance companies, and I'm not an advocate for insurance companies, for in this case, I think it's a great idea.
So you're talking about how you have to insure your car. You'd also have to insure your gun.
Yes.
And
So they
if
would
your
pay
gun
out
causes
if
damage.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have to pay a premium, and
Yes.
if you kill somebody or somebody dies using your
The gun.
you have to pay whatever damages.
Yeah.
I've
always
that
thought that.
I can't put my finger on it, but I feel like
Yeah.
there's several billion reasons why that won't happen, and that would be the fact that companies are like, no, we're not gonna get involved in that.
No, but it should.
There's insurance companies for everything. You can insure your marriage.
Yes.
Can you?
I think
Well, why
you
are
can.
people telling me now? Anyway,
And then you have a divorce, payout if you get divorced. I think we can have
In a
one
certain
for guns.
amount of time, yeah.
we are going to take a break, but before we go to break, I wanted to mention that Ms. Ash 3070 in the chat says, Chelsea, you're not narcissistic. You're well educated with many great points to raise. Please don't feel self-conscious about that, Chelsea. So you see, and I think if I scratch under here where it says Miss Ash, look at that. It says Shareable Texas underneath. It's teasing. We love Shareable Texas. Anyway, we'll take a little break, and we will resume this part of the conversation, and we'll get to some more right after this. And welcome back to the Trump Report. I am joined, as I was prior to the break, Scott Moore, Tamra Brown, Chelsea Galicia. You can find them all on Twitter. Just follow the show at Trump Report ABTV, and then you will see anything and everything you need to know about the show, which is how to follow all of us. In any case, there was something that I saw during the break, and that was that some of the students who were survivors of the shooting in Florida are actually going to Capitol Hill today, as there was a ban on assault rifles that was halted. There's an effort towards that. What I want to sort of move past that to talk about is President Trump is at least, it's like a toe in the water kind of approach, but he's got the right approach to this. He's not saying, oh, well, we can't possibly change the process for the background checks. He's saying, like, sure, that sounds like something we should really look at. And in politics speak, it means, oh, we're not going to do anything about that. Mm-hmm. But we'll say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we should really look at that. So, when he tweets, he doesn't say the right thing. But when it's filtered through the people, the press, the best people that he has working for him, and so we're told, I believe that he can make the good points. And as we saw earlier this week, he is even willing to sort of deal with the bump stock issue. And Chelsea, you and I were speaking before the show, but we don't really know what bump stock is, and so I don't know how it works, but I know that it makes it so that, because you always hear about it after a lot of these shootings, so that you can basically sort of spray gunfire like you see in the movies. So just you're able to fire a lot more. And it definitely seems like the sort of thing that it is one of those no nonsense, just like common sense. Yeah, let's do away with that. But it'll go back to the whole, like, yeah, but then they're going to want to do away with the gun that you did that to, and the this, and the bullet that was in it, and all that. But at the very least, you still don't have the debates. You don't have the conversation. If there's, and Scott, we talk about this on the show a lot. It would be great if we had rigorous debates on things, and even if it doesn't change, at least it's out there and people talked about it. I think that's the last thing that either party wants, by the way. Mm-hmm. They don't want their voters to hear, like, Democrats don't want to hear, like, hey, you know what? A couple of those things made sense. Let me think about my vote when it comes November. Maybe I don't want to automatically vote for the Democrat/Republican. So I think President Trump is at least, when he's not tweeting, sort of saying the right, cautious, let's take a look at these things. Chelsea, do you feel like it's just lip service, that his administration will not look at any of these things? Or can you be cautiously optimistic that perhaps they will?
First instinct is to say, it's just lip service, because as soon as this is all done, like, wants to go back to infrastructure. I mean, do we even have time for infrastructure now?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if that's on the agenda.
Well, that was not going to happen anyways, and we knew that.
So frankly, this might be a great. I don't want to call it a distraction, because it is a worthy subject, issue to talk about. But anything that doesn't sound like Russia or collusion might be a good thing to keep talking about, even if it's just talking about it. But do I believe that there's going to be anything of real change? Like, there's going to be a vote in Congress that something passes that the NRA does not like? Not a chance.
Yeah, and by the way, I think if you had the makeup of Congress where it was Democrats controlling both houses, you still wouldn't get it passed. I think that there's enough money to go around, enough interests for the NRA. Our friend Drexel Hurd, who would sometimes be on the show in the past, he will blatantly say that the NRA is a terrorist organization. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are people who feel that way, but I think where you get into trouble is where you start to consider anyone who is a member of the NRA is a potential terrorist mm-hmm. or a terrorist. You can question the motives of the people behind it, but people who are members of the NRA, a number of people. I was going to say
like everyday members, not the people
your
that
everyday
are in the
members are
or
just people who believe that they should be able to have guns, and they don't want that to change. So this is an organization that they feel represents that.
I hope that there are members of the NRA that become sort of so disgusted with the NRA that they start their own NRA with
the alt
sensible
NRA.
Yes,
I love it.
love
the
the
alt
name.
NRA.
Yes, that they.
You better patent that quickly, Tamra.
Like right now.
For gun rights, but understand that the Constitution says well-regulated militia. and aren't such strict constructionists of right to bear arms, no regulations, no limitations whatsoever.
Like sensible gun
Yes.
rights and ownership.
And by the way, just real quick, I saw a blog by somebody who knows a lot about guns, who wrote the thing about the the militia. Should you have a need to defend yourself against a militia? We all have an uprising that comes. We are going to be up against something so huge that having AR-15, if we all had AR-15s, we're still goners.
Of
we're
course.
not going to, like,
I mean,
it's not going to help you.
If we were against the military, there is no way that anybody, and that's why it is such a joke. And going back to the bump stock thing, it basically turns in semi-automatics and automatics, and again, I don't know how it works, but that's the
you
basic
can take
thing.
a semi-automatic, it becomes an automatic.
The
weapon,
issue
absolutely.
is that it was used in Vegas, but it was not apparently used in the school shooting last week. So it still is a great thing that I think, again, could be a universal bipartisan thing. But like Chelsea said, I don't think that's going to go anywhere, especially in a midterm election year. But it still doesn't solve the underlying problems because, yes, it would help make a difference like what happened in Vegas, but you still had a school shooting where that wasn't the case, and you still need to work on the underlying problems about working on the guns and making certain guns illegal or just more difficult at the very minimum for people to get their hands on. And again, that goes back to the point of like, we need to make it as difficult as possible. Yes, there's always going to be loopholes and ways for people to get things that they want, but we've got to make it harder for those people to get those things.
Right. And one
and not
argument,
just leave it alone.
one argument that I've been hearing that I know, I can't even believe it's an argument. If we can make airports safe and no guns get through there, why can't we do the same with schools? And I'm like, has anybody ever been to a school? There's not one entrance. So does the NRA want to fund like giant bubbles that go around schools, making only one entrance, and everybody goes through a metal detector on their way in?
I mean, there are schools that are set up
do
that
that.
way.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
my high
there's-
school
there's
wasn't
been
like that.
schools. I
Well,
went to a school briefly in middle school in like 8th grade that we had one entrance and metal detectors. This was like a school I attended briefly, but that's been in existence for a while. Should all schools be that way? That's a whole new world.
My high school, you'd have to build some ginormous structure to cover all the separate structures so that there'd only be one entrance. Whoever says that apparently has not been to many high schools.
No, because like mine were all separate buildings, and that was outside, and you could go out to the street
But
from
it was
there.
like a thing of the same as airports where there was the one entrance to get into the main area, and then
Right.
once you were in this main area, then you could leave and go to the Cinnabon that's in the concourse. You can move to your different sections of the high school.
your school had a Cinnabon?
the food court.
I'm getting confusing with the analogies now. I'm
And the
jumping
different
around.
gates.
I
I'm
apologize.
sorry. I know we were talking about something serious and important, but
Yes.
then I just started like, man, I could have used this.
My school had a McDonald's.
I mean, even if
Stop
we
it.
had, even if we had metal detectors in every single door to get into the classroom, I don't even know if that's if we can afford
Exorbitant
that.
cost, yeah, when
And
you think
then
about it.
secondly, is that really going to stop somebody? I am trying to think
the
of
person that
alternative
does
ways.
not want their personal rights infringed at all are the same people that are saying, yes, let's put security checkpoints at every single.
Right. So this is what I'm saying. Like, even just trying to not look at the guns themselves and looking at other methods, you just run into what I see as dead ends very quickly unless you actually involve something related to the guns. You can't just skirt around it.
We're going to take another break in a moment, our last break of the show. But before we go, I know that there's something that Chelsea very much wants to speak about. So we will lighten the mood with a tweet from President Trump. Just watched a very insecure Oprah Winfrey, who at one point I knew very well, interview a panel of people on 60 Minutes. The questions were biased and slanted, the facts incorrect. Hope Oprah runs so she can be exposed and defeated just like all of the others. So, as a perfect example of, maybe focus on your damn job, Mr. President, and not, God, Look, we're here at AfterBuzz TV, where it's people's jobs to talk about after shows and no one in this building watches anywhere near as much TV as President Trump. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that he watches. The TV must be on constantly. He's got, you know,
Focus on his job. I think he is. His job is to tweet divisive points that separate the country. Isn't that what his job is?
If
Isn't that what
so, he's underpaid.
He's doing his job.
But Chelsea, as he's touching on a topic that, imagine if he also took a stab at Bernie in the tweet, this would have.
Well, this is worse because Oprah is like my third parent. I mean, I very literally, I'm not kidding. I think that Oprah is just as responsible for who I am today as my parents.
Wow.
It's not a joke.
I wasn't laughing.
Good. So, but I'm not alone in that thought that, like, I have a very personal connection to Oprah, and if you go near Oprah, I will hurt you. And I think that this is probably one of the top 3 tweets that enraged the most women in America. And I actually thank him for this because I think it adds to the anger at him, and if anger is what's needed to get you in action, to get you up to speed with what's going on in politics, and to get up and vote, I'm okay with that kind of anger, and we should be angry. And
well, they're going to need to
go after Oprah and see what happens to you.
They're going to need to stay angry for 8.5 months because election day is a long ways away.
We got to do a subtle anger.
Yes.
Well, we're going to take a subtle break here, and we'll be right back, and we'll talk collusion when we come back right after this.
Woohoo.
Well, we only have a few minutes left here, but welcome back to the Trump Report. I'm Christian Bladt, Chelsea Galicia, Tamra Brown, and Scott Moore. Scott, let's, in our final minutes, let's dive into something that, has your impeachment clock maybe ticking a little faster.
Yes, it started
the indictments, the Russian indictments that, let's be honest, there's no one on this list that it's like, that's it, that's what we're waiting for. But I wanted to start with you because I know that you have a very vested interest in this. So let me know what you thought when you heard about this, and kind of summarize the.
Well, no, I was kind of going to go back and just simplify with the tweets because it always goes back to that. Because the other day, of course, he posted like this. This is vindication. There's no collusion now. It's done, and I basically said it's not done until the fat orange clown sings.
That is rude,
but true. And kind of going back to the Oprah thing, too, I said, well, it's a shame you'll be out before you can run again.
You mean Pennywise, don't you?
Pennywise, the clown?
And if you did run again, you'd lose in a landslide. But the thing is that for so long he kept going on about it being a hoax and a witch hunt and everything else. And then he switched gears quite rapidly to say, oh, it is true, but now it's really all the other people that are involved, and why didn't Obama do anything? And why was this allowed to happen? So it's just fascinating to kind of see how his brain works. Now he's twisting it back around. And the bigger point was, even though Rosenstein did say this says that no Americans are directly involved, it was these indictments at that moment meant they were not involved. And I think it was also a way to preserve his job as well, to kind of keep Trump away from threatening to fire him and derail this investigation, because if he could play into the fact that no Americans were involved with this series of indictments, that would keep Trump away. And it worked exactly that way, because now Trump went out and said, oh, now you see there's no collusion. I have nothing involved with it. But it does mean it's getting closer and closer and closer to this point to whoever might be involved.
If this were the movie All the President's Men, how far into the movie are we right now? Are we at the 1 hour point yet?
Oh, we're past the 1 hour point.
Oh my gosh! So we're further along.
We're getting closer to the third act. We're getting closer to that climax now.
I'm surprised that we're that far along.
Yes, no, we are. We're definitely we're there. But again, it's still going to take some time, and I wouldn't expect it to be through before the elections.
And Tamra, President Trump tweeted, I never said Russia did not meddle in the election. I said it may be Russia or China or another country or group, or it may be a 400-pound genius sitting in bed and playing with his computer. The Russian, using quotes, hoax was that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. It never did. I don't know. I kind of remember him saying that Russia did not get involved in the election. I remember him very specifically saying that.
Sure, he said that.
Yeah, well, Putin told him.
Look, I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible.
Please.
Two things. I do think Trump, I don't know. I think the narcissism is so encompassing that you are in favor of anybody who throws their weight behind you, be it a white supremacist, Russians that could ultimately, illegal activity, cause you illegal activity. That doesn't even matter in his brain. Somebody is trying to boost him, and to allow them to do so is all he knows how to do. And he doesn't have the intelligence to realize that he did colluded. He did collude with Russia. I don't think he knows that he did do that.
That's where my brain went. This didn't prove that there was no collusion.
Right.
It was just that maybe he was so, I don't want to be like dumb.
I would say, and flattered.
I don't want to.
I would have said like flattered because they were giving him lavish attention and everything else.
Didn't even realize
It's such an automatic response for him, for somebody to be like, we're going to help. They don't even have to finish the sentence, and he's like, done. And it does not matter how ultimately bad that could be for him. He doesn't have the foresight to think like that. It's just that he colluded with Russia. He doesn't even know that he did that.
So the question is going to be, can he be impeached for negligently colluding?
Well, I think we're also going to find out again, and I think what's really going to come down to was there obstruction of justice and what was going on with that. Because even if it wasn't so bad, which in the big scheme of things, what happened with Watergate with Nixon wasn't so bad. It was all the subsequent covering up and impeding the investigation and the obstruction of justice, and that's exactly what we're seeing, or what we might be seeing here with Trump in that same capacity. So that's the problem. Was there obstruction of justice even more so than the actual direct colluding? That's going to be a big issue as well, which is also criminal and also subject to technically having him impeached or whatever.
Which is all some great things that we'll be able to look forward to.
Yes.
There's lots of speculation, rampant and otherwise, that we'll be able to get to.
That's right, and that's what we don't know what Mueller is finding right now.
We will pick this up again next week, I'm sure. I don't know. I have a hunch that there'll be more news about this in the week ahead. But until then, thank you to everyone on AfterBuzz TV and America's Voice for checking out the Trump Report. For Scott Moore at SMan80, Tamra Brown at Hey Tamra, and sometimes at Hey Tamra _, and Chelsea Galicia at Chelsea Galicia. I'm Christian Bladt at Christian DMZ. Don't forget to follow the show at Trump Report ABTV, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.